A new Marquette Law School poll finds a mixed reaction to President Trump's first moves in office.
Nearly a month into his second term, the national survey looked at Trump's executive orders and approval of the U.S. Supreme Court. Lots to talk about today with the director of the poll, Charles Franklin.
Hello.
Hi, Charles. Good to see you.
Good to be here.
Boy, there was a lot in this poll. So in the last 3 weeks, more than 60 executive orders, and you asked people in your poll what among them were their most favorite and least favorite, and what did it show?
We asked about 8, and the most favorite was declaring that there are 2 biological sexes, but close behind was an emergency on the southern border and greater oil and gas drilling. The least popular were taking back the Panama Canal and the January 6 pardons, and the single least popular was renaming the Gulf of Mexico.
And I wanted to ask, too, a buzzword right now, tariff. We've been hearing a lot about that. And I see some people say, like, this is a negotiation tactic. We're in it for the long haul. Some people are expressing some frustration, saying, wow, I didn't know that this would be more expensive for me. What did your poll show about how people feel about tariffs? People
are really not sold on tariffs, despite President Trump campaigning so much about them during the fall. Just 24% think that tariffs will help the economy. 46% think they'll hurt the economy, and 30% say no difference or I don't know. So that balance is pretty negative. Even among Republicans, only 49% think tariffs help the economy. That drops to about 12% among independents and 4% among Democrats.
Are people still very polarized by sides? In other words, is this a reflection of how they feel about him or the individual issues?
It's actually both, because not surprisingly, Republicans are very fond of the president. He has an 89% job approval with Republicans, and he's getting over 90% support on those executive orders that are very popular that we talked about. But among Republicans, that drops to about 2/3 support on the unpopular executive orders. And the big thing is independents, who give pretty big majorities to the 4 popular proposals, but give quite negative views of the 4 that are unpopular. And independents are very skeptical on tariffs as well.
Yeah, and some of those executive orders are causing a lot of uncertainty. I'm talking about the federal freeze, putting a lot of different programs in that kind of liminal space. How are people feeling about those?
I think I don't know. We didn't ask questions about that because that came after we were in the field doing the survey. We'll obviously ask about them in the next poll. But I think you've got 2 things going on. All of this is coming very fast, and ordering things to halt and payments to be stopped doesn't mean that people downstream are immediately aware of what those impacts are. And of course, the courts are engaged in these questions as well. I think it'll be a month, 2 months before we start to realize whether the programs that are being cut actually affect us individually or affect some other guy.
Speaking of the courts, you asked about approval of the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah. That's been inching up for the last year, really, and this time, for the first time in over a year, over 2 years, has reached 51% approval. The court had been down in the 40s or even the 30s after overturning Roe v. Wade. But in this last year, we've seen it inching up to just over 50% now.
What do you attribute that to? What do you think
I think partly it's the court hasn't made any blockbuster decisions recently. The Roe versus Wade decision is fading into the background, even though the issue is still around. I think the real test comes in June, when the court hands down all of the big cases of the year. At that point, do people respond positively or negatively? People like some of the things the court has done recently. They like that they upheld the TikTok ban, for example, but they don't like that they said presidents have immunity from criminal prosecution. So it's kind of a split decision on some of the recent decisions.
And we'll have more to talk about, so we'll see you soon for the next poll then?
We'll have plenty of things coming out to talk about, no doubt.
Thank you, Charles.
Great to see you, Charles. Thanks so much.